The first 12 chapters of John's Gospel are sometimes called the Book of Signs. They're stories of Jesus' great miracles, actions that provoke wonder and amazement from all who witness them. Now, the Gospel writer is clear about why he tells us these stories. In chapter 20, verses 30 to 31, Jesus performed many other signs that are not written in this book, but these have been written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Son of God, and that believing you may have life in his name. So signs are given to us so that we may believe and that we may have life. In the passage we heard today, we find Jesus in chapter 10 of John's Gospel, between two great miracle stories, the gift of sight to the man born blind and the raising of Lazarus. And as he so often needs to do after his signs, Jesus tries to explain what has just happened, that his power has come not from him, but from the one who has sent him. Some see and hear and believe. Others criticize and question his authority. Still others are perplexed and they ask more and more questions. So in this passage, in chapter 10, Jesus paints them a picture of a shepherd tending his flock. And he describes some things that a good shepherd might do. In verse 3, the shepherd calls his sheep by name, and the sheep follow him because they know his voice. In verse 10, the shepherd comes so that his sheep may have life and have it abundantly. In verses 14 and 15, the shepherd offers communion, unity, and wholeness. I know my own, and my own know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father. Can you picture this shepherd calling us by name, bringing us life, drawing us into communion? I have to confess, I personally do not know a lot of shepherds. I am a lifelong city dweller, but the person who comes to mind for me is my friend John. I've told you about John before. John, who died a few years back, was a farmer, a musician, and a great shepherd of souls. John had Down syndrome. He was someone of great importance to me. He presented me when I was ordained to the priesthood, albeit somewhat reluctantly. The first couple of times I asked him about it, he politely declined. He said, I don't think so. John didn't like church. He didn't care about formalities. He just cared about people. He had a few standard questions he used to keep tabs on his friends. How are you? How's your mom doing? How's your car running? The words were simple, but he had this way of just drawing you in. And when you opened your mouth to answer him, you'd find yourself asking, how am I doing really? And in his gentle way, he went right to the heart of things. I don't know how he did it, but he carried an authority of relationship that could disarm and captivate those around him. Sometimes he gave his friends nicknames, especially if their names were a little bit hard to pronounce. Often the nicknames had to do with where you came from. For example, one friend became Lady Poland, another Mr. Newfoundland. Yet another from small-town North Carolina was known as Mr. United States. Now, there was the time that Mr. United States said, John, if I'm Mr. United States, then who's this? Pointing to me. And John turned to me, and with a dramatic sweep of his arm, he proclaimed, Miss America. That happened just that once. John loved meeting new people, asking them their name, where they're from, did they have a business card, and he'd affirm them with a nod of his head and a few simple phrases. Pretty good. I heard that. And people would just open up to him. It was always delightful to go around town with John and watch his artful way of engaging people. As he approached them, you could see them wondering, who is this? But then you'd watch their expression shift from surprised to curious to drawn in. What was remarkable about John was how he received every person he met with great enthusiasm and honor. His greetings were big, joyful, and boisterous. If he didn't know your name, he might call you Big Guy. Now, for John, this was a term of both respect and endearment. How you doing, Big Guy? He might ask of someone he was meeting for the first time. Now, you didn't have to be big or a guy for John to call you Big Guy. He bestowed this title generously on car salesmen, politicians, and baristas at Starbucks, on sweet baby girls with pink bows in their hair, on burly officers at airport security checkpoints that asked him to take his shoes off. Even animals could be Big Guy for John, a farmer at heart. A horse on the educational farm where he worked, a little lamb that he cuddled in his arms, a mouse I once found under the kitchen sink. And while I squealed, John calmly got down on his hands and knees and said to the mouse, "Come here, Big Guy." And he set a plastic container over it like a dome, slid the lid under it, and then took the whole thing out to the backyard so he could set it free. John called us by name, and this naming revealed his generosity of spirit. To John, you weren't just some guy, you were Big Guy. He had a way of magnifying you with graciousness and enthusiasm, and of elevating everyone around him. What a gift that is. He had a little routine after supper each night where he would go around the supper table and introduce each person by name. And the expected response was applause and cheering for each and every person, even if you were feeling a little less than enthusiastic about somebody that day. Sometimes, at the end of the introductions, he might award a prize, like a quarter or a candy bar, to whoever had cooked or brought pie for dessert, or sometimes just to the newest person in the room. There's a story from many years ago of a wealthy American benefactor who visited and had supper at John's house. When he greeted her by name and led the applause for her and presented her with that night's prize, a dime, she said she felt like she'd won the jackpot because she couldn't remember the last time she was celebrated, not for her money, but just for being herself. John called us by name. He brought us abundant life, and he was a minister of communion. One of my most treasured stories about John is one I didn't actually see firsthand. Years ago, when my dad died, a caravan of beloved friends made their way to the funeral, driving along 2 Great Lakes in February, trying to dodge snowstorms all the way down and all the way back. And John was one of these friends. Now, remember, John didn't like church, except if it meant being there for someone important to him. On the day of the funeral, dressed in a suit and tie, John sat in the back of the crowded parish church where my siblings and I had grown up. I'm told that he was concerned about trying to see where I was sitting at the front with my family. And when it was time for communion, he stood up and got in line to receive, which is unusual for him, not usually going to church. When he got up to the front, the priest placed the host in his hand. John took it, examined it, then turned to his friend next to him and said, "I don't think so." And then he handed his friend the host, and in that same gesture, he went to greet my mother and my brothers, who were seated in the very front row. And I'm told that each of those big guys was undone by John's kindness as he reached out and embraced them. John knew why he'd made that long, snowy trip, precisely for that moment of communion. Can you picture this shepherd calling us by name, bringing us abundant life, drawing us into communion? You may have noticed over these past years that I have shared quite a few stories of remarkable people I have known at L'Arche. Why do I tell you these stories? Not because they're entertaining, though they can be, or because they're interesting, also often true, but I tell you these things because this is what I have in my book of signs. These are some of the people who have taught me about God among us, the Word made flesh. Sometimes I hear someone say that they've never had occasion to meet or to spend time with someone with a disability. And if this is the case for you, maybe the next time you encounter someone, you might be open to receiving whatever unique gift they may be carrying. This is one reason I share these stories. But more than that, I share these stories because of the common threads, the things that resonate with the experiences that you have shared with me about a sibling with a disability, a loved one with dementia, our own diagnosis with a chronic or life-limiting illness, stories about our efforts to walk faithfully with someone we love when their needs are changing, stories about how hard it is to be with someone precious to us as they approach the end of life, stories of vulnerability, of hope, and of grace. I want to thank you for welcoming me into some of these threshold moments with you, at home, in hospital, at the grave. Thank you for sharing your stories and your signs. Thank you for your trust. Thank you for your encouragement. Thank you for your prayers. This is what community is made of. Simple gestures, calling each other by name, magnifying and lifting each other up, sharing in a communion born of knowing and being known. This is how we learn to follow Jesus, that good and gentle shepherd who gives us sign after sign after sign, so that we may believe, and so that we may have life. Thanks be to God.